He decides the Imperium cannot endure by waiting for miracles. The Golden Throne screams for fuel, and the Astronomicon gutters. He calculates a passage beyond known membranes, seeking a stable psychic ecology he can learn from or bend. His motive is survival for humanity. His method is math and sacrifice. Webway vectors braided through a choir of willing lives and his own will made spear. He names the destination by its frequency, not its language. A world where life force flows in patterned circuits instead of raw soul current. On the fifth word of a prayer he does not permit himself to finish. The breach answers. The sky above the hidden leaf splits along a seam of daylight. Threads of pale gold pull through a blue fabric. Wind folds inward. Shingles clatter. Birds veer and vanish as if the air itself becomes a slope. Farmers on the forest edge drop their baskets, papery leaves lifting like moths into a foaming aureole. Children point, then flinch when the light turns sound into a bell that can be felt under the ribs. Shadows race along training fields. Jonin halt mid-kata. A white-masked Anbu pauses on a rooftop, eyes narrowing above a painted beak. The barrier team at the village perimeter stumbles as their detection net registers something that is not chakra, but maps across the net as if it were a mountain. In the Hokage's office, Tsunade sets down a brush and hears glass creak in the frames. He hangs there at first, not descending so much as asserting a reference point into the world's idea of up. Plate the color of old sun, robes like banners of silence, eyes that carry horizons. When he steps, gravity remembers its job and the village exhales as if the threat of drowning has passed. The air around him organizes into planes and vectors. Rain, which had not been forecast, decides to wait. Shizune reaches the window first. "My lady." "I see him," Tsunade says, and the word is steadier than her blood. She does not know what he is, but she knows the vector of a disaster when she tastes one. She feels the pressure change like a storm that has found a face. On a practice field, a team of genin stares up, their sensei dragging them back with an arm like a steel cable. Sakura tightens her gloves until stitching protests. Kakashi, arriving on a high eve with an eye that has watched gods die in rumor, flips the page of his book without reading it. "Team, keep distance," he says, because orders are anchors. In a room that is not on any plan, men who are not on any roster look up from a paper map marked in a script only their faction reads. Root operatives feel the shift as a dent in habit, a subtraction of comfort. In the center, Danzo Shimura places 2 fingertips on the map and decides where suspicion should go next. "Observe, do not engage," he says, and the masks dip once before leaving like erased lines. He senses them sensing him. Their world's field hums, ordered, repetitive, delightfully contained. Life energy braided into circuits with vowels called tenketsu, spilling into patterned functions called jutsu. A civilization sits upon this network like a windmill on a river. He feels curiosity move under his ribs, like the first breath after drowning. It is not indulgence, only additional fuel. The ground trembles, not his doing. The air thumps like a slow heartbeat, and the sky buckles again, this time from below. To the north, beyond the tree line, a ripple of gravity moves. It is clean, controlled, purposeful, human in a way that insults him. Someone nearby treats force and movement like toys. The Deva path of pain steps into the light of Konoha's main avenue. Pupils rings within rings, bodies of his other paths fanning out through alleys like fingers seeking a throat. Civilians shrink from a presence as cold as a collapsed star. In the forest behind the wall, summons rustle with the patient danger of a bird of prey adjusting its position. He turns fractionally, and the air stiffens. His attention has weight. Tsunade feels her ribs give against a band of fear, then finds her voice. Kakashi, barrier teams, Anbu. We meet the man in gold and the man with rings at the same time, or we die separately. Her orders crackle down lines. Bells ring in short bursts. The village shifts from casual to clenched. Pain looks up at the figure standing in sunlight that looks too clean for any battlefield. You are not in the book, he says, voice level as if noting weather. But everything that breathes can be taught pain. The Emperor of Mankind descends the last meter like a verdict. You inflict pain to distribute meaning, he says, and his voice is not loud, but it is in every room. A childish arithmetic. Leave. Devapath lifts a hand. The moment is as quiet and brief as the curl of a fingertip, and then gravity inverts. Stone squeals, wood protests, roofs lep, the avenue unseams. Shinra Tensei, in its first testing pulse, moves down the street like a flensing knife. He steps into it. Plates flare like dawn. The field that is not chakra spreads its lattice, opposed to everything that calls itself outward. The wave splits around him as if he is a pillar sunk to bedrock. Stall awnings whip, tear, and then fall neatly in halves. A child's paper windmill spins itself to ruin and stops without hitting the ground. The second pulse is not a test. Buildings leave their foundations in solidarity, and then remember that solidarity is heavy. Tsunade feels teeth grit into powder. Kakashi moves, and there is not enough move for this. The Emperor plants a foot, and the world decides to pretend it is reasonable. His field hardens from brass to something that makes brass apologize. Cracks spiderweb under him, cancelling. The force that should have been everywhere is now an argument against him. He holds it in his palm until it stops being proud and sets it aside. Pressure slams through his chest and he does not flinch. The golden throne across an unimaginable gulf hisses as something is borrowed without permission. Somewhere in the Palace of Terror, a choir of bound psykers coughs blood into gags and do not stop until they are too tired to suffer. Codex note: a controlled counter-gravimetric ablation field can redirect the vectorized impact if the field is anchored to a mind capable of asserting frame supremacy over local physics. Silence has seams. It splits when a window blinks free of its frame and set down dust size. It splits when people remember to gasp. In that seam, a boy trips on a loose tile and goes down hard, breath leaving with a noise like a bird punched from the air. The Emperor is there without crossing the space between, one hand open. The boy's tumble becomes a slide, stopped by a palm that is softer than it looks. Go, he says. And the boy goes because you do what a mountain says when it takes the time to speak. Devapath does not blink. The other paths finish getting into position. Asura's face reshapes into fists and guns. Hungry ghosts' fingers itch for current. Animal's mouth is already opening to somewhere else. Conan, a sheet of paper and knives, is near enough for any word to matter, and far enough for none to reach. Tsunade lands in the street with a sound like a door slammed in a god's face. Shizune beside her, Anbu in leaves of shadow, Kakashi above and left, and thinking faster than any book could tell him to. You are in my village, she calls to the man in rings and the man in sun, dividing her words like rationed water. So you both answer me. I answer no one and everyone, Pain says. You will teach the world pain, or I will. Your monster is in your belly. I have come to collect it and leave meaning in its place. She doesn't look at her belly. She is not Naruto. And you? She asks the one who looks like a statue, kneeling to measure them. I answer to humanity, he says. You have a different name for it. Protect your people. I will protect the world from that one until you can stand. The Devapath moves. The street peels. He meets it again, and this time he shapes it. The outward rush becomes a ring that flows around civilian clusters, around hospital walls, around the old academy building where a school bell hangs uselessly. The structure of Konoha becomes a diagram laid over an equation. He refuses trauma its favorite places. The cost slides under his armor like a knife under laces. He can feel terror dimming through him. He can feel demons sniffing at the opportunity, like carrion birds that have learned to read calendars. He redoubles the warding prayers he does not believe in, and believes in anyway, because humans do not have to enjoy their tools to use them. Kakashi drops next to him with a soft noise and a nod that is respect, not surrender. "We have a target with multiple bodies and one mind," he says clipped. "The one with circles is the center. He can push and pull. Time between big pushes, 5 seconds or so. Hold him busy," Tsunade says, and the words are barked to leaders in her head. Shikaku, Shizune, the barrier team, every squad leader worth their flak. "We go for the puppeteer. Protect the civilians. Gold..." She stops herself, because she has not earned the right to name him. "You. If you can keep him from flattening my hospital, I will appreciate it." He does not nod. He does it. The hospital becomes a kept promise in the shape of a building. Nurses continue to move because moving is what makes them human. Someone drops a tray and someone else catches it, and the tray clatters anyway, and no one minds. Root watches from rafters and gutters, counting possibilities. Danzo sends a thought along a line and waits to see if it comes back bitten. "Preserve assets," he says to the shades. "If the golden one can be turned into a weapon, we will turn him. If he cannot, we will test how he breaks." Pain tires of testing. The ground breathes in and out at his will. The gravitational sum becomes Pain's grammar, punctuation, and final paragraph. The Emperor refuses each sentence in turn, breaking up the rhetoric into harmless clauses. Conan's paper storms collect and shred as if thrown into a furnace of utility. Animal Path opens its mouth like a hinge and calls out something with blades for joints. It lands like a thrown house. He catches it by the thought and sends it back home without letting it remember why it left. Hungry Ghost lunges into his field and staggers as it takes a bite it cannot swallow. His energy is not chakra. It is an ocean that remembers being a vacuum. At Tsen Anand, on the hill outside the village, Shikaku pushes pieces on a board and sees a shape that is not in any 7x7 game he has played. He calculates time budgets, personnel burn rates, the weight of promises. His eyes flick to where the Hokage stands, to the gold figure who stands near her, and he assigns both to a temporary myth column. 5-second window, he murmurs again to write it on the wall inside. Find a way to set a trap that can fit in that. Kakashi has 2 ways. Both are bad. Both are all that exist. He moves as if the decision has already been made. Animal, Asura, Pain says without raising his voice. Ruin, human, chase the mind. Prita, taste the sun. Naraka, be ready. They move. The avenue is a throat. The battle is a cough. The Emperor steps through violence like a teacher through children arguing, gently moving hands with unseen pressure so knives miss. A gust of paper slashes at his face and turns into ash and shame. He does not look at Conan except to understand her. The paper is a discipline. The sheaf a life rewoven to escape pain and deliver it. The tailing edges tremble like a decision not to cry. He could end all of it. He could pour a sun into a bowl and make the bowl learn manners. He could tear the strings out of the one mind-wearing bodies like rings on a hand. He does not. Costs map themselves on the inside of his eyelids like burned-in stars. Kakashi tries the one plan that requires something like luck. He times his jab in the gap between the Deva Path's pulses, stepping into reach, hand skinned with lightning that knows where it is supposed to go. The Emperor feels the small, perfect moment and tilts the world a degree in Kakashi's favor. It matters. Then it is stolen. A black rod rises at the last possible instant, and the world opens like a trapdoor. He sees it. The rods, the receivers, the multiplicity that is unity. He follows the signal line with his mind the way a hunter follows a crack through snow. It goes out of Konoha and into a place where bodies sit like rinsed bones in a room that stinks of medicine and grief, where a man named Nagato wears pain like a duty because he has forgotten other names for love. He could burn the line. He does not. He will not solve this with burn. Asura's missiles corkscrew in, and he has to solve those with burn. He cups a hand, and the idea of fire obeys. The missiles become lines drawn on the air that never meet their ends. Energy shreds follow them like bad decisions. The hospital windows tremble and then decide to mind their own business. Tsunade moves, body an argument for muscle memory and stubbornness. She relays orders and breaks bone with love. She is aware of the Golden One, the way a mountain is aware of rain. The mountain will do what it does, and the rain will find its channels. Kakashi is not so aware of anything except the next move. He clocks the 5-second rhythm in his bones, thumbs the edge of an eye that does not belong to him, thinks of promises and the price of the impossible. He looks for an opening and sees a ring of rings. Hungry Ghost touches the Emperor's aura again and curls as if it has drunk boiling iron. He files that down. They can taste, but not swallow. Deva raises a hand. He calculates again. He is bored by any world that thinks mathematics is a choice. He takes a step that is not a step and stands between the pull and the pushed. He keeps the world from humiliating itself by coming apart. People cheer because people have to. He does not notice because he is reading the field more closely now. Under the chakra, under the movement, there is a noise like an animal that sings in its sleep. He hears the Ninetales, not as a demon, but as a pressure, a red ocean behind a door the villagers painted on a boy and called safety. The resonance between his field and that door is small and hungry. He reduces his output a fraction, creating slack in the pattern so that door does not rattle off its hinges. It costs more twice when you go careful once. Tsunade finds the breath to say, "Thank you," although she will not know exactly what for until later. He does not nod at her. Acknowledgement would make it about them, and it is about everyone else. Conan is paper and sorrow and knives. She is also a strategist, and she sees what Deva refuses to admit. This is not working. Retreat, she says, meaning regroup, meaning call the plan something else, meaning do not die for a rubric. Pain does not retreat. Pain advances theories until flesh proves them. He raises his hand a third time. The Emperor feels a change in tone that has nothing to do with gravity. Space indents to his right, like a thumb on wet clay. A man in an orange mask finds a place to stand where standing should be impossible. The air around him has the calm of a lie that has gotten away with it too often. "Akatsuki," the masked one says pleasantly, as if greeting an acquaintance at a festival. "Revised plan. Take the fox once the village is finished being interesting." Danzo's watchers mark the newcomer with a symbol that means variable that will try to own the board. One of them begins a message and decides to wait until his hands stop trembling. The Emperor turns his face to the new arrival, and the field shifts around his shoulders like a cloak thrown over a different shape. This one is not a gravity problem. This one is a topology problem. Space near the masked man is more opinion than fact. The masked man tilts his head. "And you," he says lightly. "You are new, not of chakra, not of this story. Curious. You may be very useful." Pain does not look at him. "Do not interfere," he says as if talking to a tool. "This is mine. Everything is everyone's. the masked one says, with a cheerfulness that smells like copper. But yes, finish your sermon. The Emperor's eyes focus without moving. Why do you wear someone else's name? He asked the masked man. And why do you think the truth can be deleted by saying it is false? The masked man's chuckle does not have humor in it. Because it works, he says, and then his edges blur as he leans into not being touched by the world. Devapath's hand falls. The third pulse is not like the others. It is a statement rather than a question, a full stop rather than a comma. Streets leap, memory buckles. The village makes a noise that some would later insist was a prayer, and others would insist was a curse, and all of them would be right. He could break it with force. He breaks it with grammar instead. His field vectors turn 90 degrees and declare that out is down, and down is a place with nowhere to go. The pulse falls into a well that did not exist a second ago. It hammers at the walls like a heart in a chest that refuses to die. He holds the well closed with his attention, sweat bright on his lip for the first time, this hour. The masked man watches his hand and learns something about the hand's owner that will be useful later. He tests his own edges against the golden one's edges. They do not scrape, they do not touch. They produce a feeling like an itch you cannot locate. Kakashi moves again, because this is the window the village paid for with breath and spilled tea and broken roof tiles. He meets Asura, and Asura is a lesson in kinetic anatomy. The Emperor cannot be everywhere. He chooses the problem that can kill the most at once and leaves the others to people who have always been enough. Tsunade drives a punch into a mass of summoned meat and hears bones that started as something else break. Shizune slides a body out from under a beam with hands that know exactly where to push, so the beam becomes polite. Anbu throw themselves at geometry. You do not belong here, Pain says to the Emperor as if that matters. I belong where humanity survives, the Emperor says, and a teacher who once taught him to laugh at pompous lines rolls in her grave and smiles anyway, because he finally gets to be exactly who he is. Conan scatters, paper becoming rain. The masked man disappears as if the concept of behind has been given a promotion. Devapath raises his hand to make an answer worth remembering for later generations. A ripple passes through not space. The Emperor feels it not as a ripple, but as a subtracting of choices. The masked man has opened a place that does not agree with being counted, and he is preparing to drop something into it that does not agree with being named. Enough, Tsunade says, but it is not for them. It is for herself. She can direct the world, but she cannot direct this. He takes a breath he does not need and meters the next expense. The throne whimpers in the far distance. The choir sleeps badly and will wake starving. He drops a net over the world that is not his and closes his hand, very gently, over the masked man's nothing. For a finger's width of time, nothing is something. The masked man's eye widens. Interesting, he says, because fear is a kind of interest when you have not admitted you can die. It will not hold. It is enough to force a plan. He steps back the distance of a thought and lets the pulse in the well die against his decision. Debris falls obediently into safe places. A tall awning that has been heroic gives up and slumps. Tsunade hears herself call for evacuation patterns she has shouted in drills and never expected to use. Shikaku adjusts variables and knows this is no longer the fight he thought it was. This is a holding action for a village to survive something no textbook had space for. Kakashi, bleeding from somewhere we cannot see, decides he is not dead until he says so. Danzo flicks his eyes at a line and tells a man to be ready to spear this golden one through the heart if opportunity makes the request. The man nods because nodding is what he has left. The Emperor lifts his chin and measures his breath against an economy he can no longer call sustainable. Plan, he says, not louder, but more. Tsunade is already moving to the hospital, because the village lives or dies there while the street remembers how to be a street. Shikaku, command post now. Kakashi, coordinate with Anbu and keep the paths away from wards and water mains. Shizune, triage. Gold. Her mouth firms. If you can hold him to small pulses, we can make this into a fight we know how to have. He looks at the masked man, who is already fading into the privilege of not being where sharp things are. He looks at Devapath, who is indexing certainty. He looks at the women and men of the leaf, whose exhaustion has a sensible shape. I will hold the largest knives, he says. Your people cut the ropes. Variable approaching, Shikaku says through a runner who doesn't trip this time. We're getting signal interference patterns. Something like a field that says not here is eating our tags. Whoever that masked one is, he can reach into anywhere we call safe if we let him define the map. Define it for him, the Emperor says without turning. Names are leashes if you know what they mean. Show me his geometry. I will hold it until your diagrams can hold themselves. Shikaku does not need to understand to obey. Inoichi, he says, and the man who wears telepathy like a polite hat nods and reaches for the mind net, spreading thought like thin butter over too much bread, linking squads, weaving names. A child cries and stops because a stranger in gold looks at him the way good fathers look at storms they are about to move. Somewhere in the forest, a toad of noteworthy size pauses mid-hop and says a word that means prophecy when you say it in a language with more vowels. Far away, on a mountain where training turns boys into something harder than bone, a blonde kid who laughs too loud and too often with pain in the seams of it feels something pull at the knot in his belly and snarls without knowing why. The masked man watches all this from a safe distance. You could measure in lies. We schedule, he says to Pain, voice easy as sleep. You do your message. I do my harvest later. Do not be boring. Pain does not look at him. The world will be bored with their old mistakes when I am finished, he says, which would be poetry if poetry were allowed here. The Emperor notices the demons again. They are looking at this world with greed, but the door is not theirs. It is a different kind of door, carved in spirals and taught to spiral more. He wraps his will around the village like a bandage. He does not pull too tight. Blood needs somewhere to go. Prepare for a lightfall, he tells Tsunade. What does that mean? She asks, already moving. It means I'm going to drop the sky onto one man and put pillows under everything else, he says. And then he does it. Clouds thicken, not with water, but with a decision. The air cools like a variation on mercy. Devapath looks up at the wrong time. He could move, and then he remembers he is right, and rightness does not require moving. The sky comes down like a closed hand. It is not crushing. It is placing. It is the world saying no, and meaning it. The Devapath's next pulse goes nowhere, because there is nowhere to go to. His other bodies wobble like marionettes whose puppeteer has been asked to hold his breath and is too proud to say he needs to exhale. The masked man tries to reach around the decision and almost does. The Emperor feels the slip and tacks his will into the masked man's not quite where like a nail driven into fog. It holds for a beat and then slides out with a chuckle that promises a return. Tsunade feels the hospital stop wanting to move. Nurses go on being absolute. Shikaku gets a report that the West Wall has decided to do its job today, leading to a small private smile. Kakashi sees an opening the size of a lie and throws himself into it, because that is what he is for. The village breathes. The enemy recalculates. The Golden One sways a fraction, and in that fraction is the sound of a chair in a faraway palace making a terrible noise. He straightens. The Emperor of Mankind chooses not to fall over. He opens his hand and the sky sits in it like a bird that has learned it's human. Pain smiles with only half his mouth. Interesting, he says, meaning insulting. Plan, Tsunade says again, because planning is how she continues to love people without saying it. The incursion is not over. The enemy did not come to learn. They came to preach their scripture with blood and leave a grammar of graves. The masked man does not like being measured. He will return with rulers cut from names. The war council that follows will have to fit inside a moving fight. The village will have to decide what it can pay. The emperor will have to decide what he refuses to buy. For now, the sky is in his hand, and the hospital stands, and a boy somewhere else adds a knot to the knot in his belly and prepares to run home as soon as someone tells him which direction home is. The village breathes in pieces. The hospital stands. The sky sits in his hand. Pain recalculates, masked geometry slipping away to sharpen itself in another room. The emperor tallies costs against a ledger that hates his handwriting and chooses to spend more. Orders form like bone. Shikaku sketches a trap large enough to fit a god and small enough to close in 5 seconds. Ombu redeploy to cut angles, not throats. Hyuga eyes track rods, not glory. Aburame drone nets hum as if polite. Ino Shikacho make a triangle, lock it to streets that still remember being trees and promise to become a door all at once. He moves the village into a shape that can win without dying of the cure. He bleeds pressure off water mains with a thought. He drags gas from kitchens to neutral zones where it cannot decide to become fire without permission. He detunes window glass along 3 avenues so it will bow, not shatter. The hospital stays a promise because he keeps it one. Deva Path meets a street that refuses to be a field. He pushes, intent like a tide, and finds his tide pulled sideways into channels he did not order. He frowns with the part of his face that makes decrees. 3, 2, 1, Kakashi counts to himself. And on the 4th heartbeat he is there. His palm is a straight answer. The Emperor tilts a degree, lengthening the lull by half a blink. Lightning kisses machine. Asura's jaw opens to show uglier thoughts, then goes silent. Someone with a camera anywhere else would miss it. Here, none of them have time to take pictures. Conan's paper ocean rises and breaks against air that refuses to be a knife. She shifts from slashes to binds, seeking to wrap the Golden One and carry him away on a river of shivs. He lets her paper touch the edge of his aura and then reshapes her current into harmless confetti around a group of old women and a sleeping dog. She sees the kindness and hates it. Shinra, Deva starts, then stops because he does not spend ammunition on theatre. Hungry Ghost skims close, greedy hands trembling at a banquet that will not become food. Preta, pull, Nagato says through a throat that is not present, and Preta drinks from a dry well and coughs. He calibrates. This world's techniques are vectors that call themselves destinies. He redirects, not annihilates. He quotes their grammar back at them until their sentences forget their verbs. Shikaku's voice enters the net. Ready the gate. Hayashi, mark the rods. Choza, on my mark. Inoichi, thread the mine link to the bait team. Kakashi, be bait. Kakashi deadpans always and moves without making the joke hurt anyone. The Emperor sees it take shape, the Nara shadow extending like an arrow's thought, the Akimichi mass ready to become a wall, the Yamanaka whisper seeking to ride the edge of the 5-second breath. He shaves turbulence from the space they will cross. He makes the air smooth, the earth obedient, the distance honest. Kakashi engages Devapath just inside the lull, flicker to flank, blade to rod. He misses the heart because there is no heart to miss, only a receiver. Shadow locks at calf. The street becomes glue. Chosa drops like a consequence. Ino's whisper slides along a thread of chakra and taps the mind behind the ringed eyes, not to control, only to distract with a mirror held at a bad angle. It is enough. The Emperor sieves gravity around Deva into a standing column that keeps him from spending hate. He calibrates to spare ribs and crush the certainty that keeps the hand steady. The column holds Deva to now, while the others yank next out from under him. A different path, the Naraka with its ugly truth-telling mouth, lumbers to help, and he is on it, hand open, feel the precise finger. He pins its jaw with unkindness and plucks 2 black rods with force gentler than surgery. The creature staggers and keels, mouth clacking silent judgments. Anbu binded with seals rather than knives. Codex note: black receivers keyed to an external transmitter can be extracted with microvector inversions if inertial lines are reclassified as patient rather than material. Asura looses a fan of needles, then javelins, then a chain of whip blades. He makes small rooms in the air around civilians, so the metal forgets the road and goes into a bucket stamped later. Hungry Ghost lunges a 3rd time and learns humility. The field pretends to be chakra for a hair's width, and he lets Praetor drink it. Nothing but structure and a faint taste of thunder, until the path chokes and staggers, and remembers once being a monk. Conan marks him. She cuts so her paper wraps, not slices, seeking joints between plates and will. He permits it to wrap, then freezes the paper into something with too many memories to burn. Wedding invitations, origami cranes, the receipts of promises kept. The paper falls, unable to hurt, full of history it did not ask for. Conan freezes, breath a skipped page, and then sharpens again because her life taught her to. Deva breaks the column with a pulse that has to hurt. He creates a crater and tries to call it a sermon. The Emperor bends the crater's rim and the sermon echoes in a way that flatters no one. Yuka Heihachi calls rods, Byakugan seeing metal that pretends to be bone. Anbu mark them and lay tags with hands that have done this in other wars to other lies. You expend, the Emperor tells Deva. Calm. I can serve. You write universals with a pen that leaks. Stop. Pain answers with doctrine, not words. Suffering is the only teacher that refuses bribes, he says, which is true and insufficient. The masked man watches the pattern fail to please him and decides to keep his expensive tricks until something worth the reveal convinces him. He tilts his body out of harm and out of interest, and is almost gone when an Anbu blade passes through his shoulder and does not make a mark. He smiles because physics is a toy when you own a different rulebook. The first victory comes without the trumpet. Asura falls and stays a problem only for sanitation. Naraka is captured intact, a mouth full of future intelligence. Hungry Ghost retreats, briefly wiser. Animal Path severs its own summons rather than let them be studied. Deva Path steps back 4 paces and makes it look like philosophy rather than necessity. Conan collects her paper and her breath. The masked man leaves with a punctuation mark that promises a later clause. Hold, Tsunade orders, pained by the cost of every second that looks like peace. Do not chase off the map. This is our street. We fight here. He agrees. He hates pursuit in a town. He hates chaos when medicine is busy. He stands until the sky agrees to stand as well. He angles a cheap tin sign back into place because the restaurant owner will need something normal later. The war council takes place in a room with soot on the ceiling and pencil marks on the wall that mean growth and birthdays. Tsunade takes the head by default, not drama. Shikaku uses a roller of chakra to sketch quick lines on a cracked tabletop, Inoichi's fingers rest on a map, like a parent's hand on a sleeping child's shoulder. Kakashi stands with the quiet of a man temporarily permitted to continue existing. Hiyashi's eyes seem to look through the floor and the future at once. Shibi's insects trace a small circle and decide the corners are safe. Anbu shadow the walls. The golden one makes the room feel taller without moving. Danzo arrives on a cane that only looks like wood. Two elders come with him. Wit tight and old. Politics like tightly folded fans in both hands. Root men are shadows with polite posture. Tsunade speaks first. We live. We hold two bodies. We have a 5-second window and a transmitter somewhere outside. We also have a stranger with a field that suppresses the definition of disaster. For the moment, he is on our side. I am on humanity's side, the Emperor says without apology. You are my current contact point with it. I will not rule you. I will not be ruled by you. I will protect the innocent from sermons that require their blood. The innocent, Danzo repeats, making it a test word. A broad category. Outside these walls are innocents who will become enemies as soon as an Akatsuki robe whispers their names. Mercy kills villages. We survived by having a will to do what nice people refuse to name. Steel man that position properly, Kakashi says, because someone must. Root believes the village exists because someone digs graves before breakfast so others can eat. It is not wrong that someone has to do ugly work. But Root forgets to ask whether ugliness should be a permanent constitution. Shikaku raises a palm. Strategically, we have two problems. A multi-bodied enemy we can disrupt but not yet end, and a second actor with space-time intangibility and unknown seal's capacity. The masked one can reach anywhere unless we define where, more aggressively. Third, there is the fox. If we fight like amateurs, he will take our Jinchuriki like a bowl off a shelf. Hiyashi inclines his head. The black rods respond to a far transmitter. We can follow their vectors backward through the forest with Byakugan teams, but there will be traps and decoys. Conan, Shibi says, voice dry and meticulous, is a paper ocean. If she decides to become mines instead of streamers, your streets will be arithmetic, not avenues. Tsunade rolls a shoulder that hurts. We put Naraka in a sealed room and ask it nothing until we know what it does when it's bored, she says. We prep medics as if the second wave is worse. We prep the civilian shelters for collapse and extract routes to the forest. We define the church as the hospital and fight like it is sacred. The Emperor watches them be excellent and is proud in a way that costs nothing to admit. You hesitate to say the one word you must say, he adds. Children. I will not allow children to fight. An intake of breath walks around the room. Kakashi looks at the floor that has marks of heights in pencil and thinks of names written on a stone. Shikaku thinks of budgets paid in birthdays. Hiyashi's face does not change because it has been trained not to. This village was built by children who were given no choice, Danzo says softly, and the softness is a knife kept polite by memory. We cannot erase our origin by wishing. Our enemies recruit the same age. If we make a rule that the gods cannot abide, we die under it. Then change the gods, the Emperor says, and it isn't a quip. Stop building necessary evils and calling them stability. Build necessary goods. Show us how, Tsunade says, deadpan. It is not mockery. It is an invoice for which she expects payment in process, not prayer. In this battle, he answers, I will shape force so your children do not need to be asked to carry more. Later, you will have to tell them they are allowed to grow old. Change your recruitment, change your story, or the masked one wins, even if you kill him here. Kakashi nods once, slow. Will of fire, not will of ash, he says. Noted. Danzo's hand tightens on the cane. Under his bandages, borrowed eyes do math the originals never permitted. His bandaged arm itches with grafted life that grows when it should not. He does not like being told he is the unpleasant past dressed as prudence. We need to know the stranger's limits, one elder says, voice paper cut sharp. What debt he accrues when he moves, and whether it is us who will be presented the bill. I accrue cost, the emperor says, meeting her stare. I spend from a treasury far away. It demands that I use it only for humanity and only with restraint. If I abuse it, worse than ruin visits us. I do not intend to abuse it. I do not intend to let you abuse me. Trust requires inspection, Danzo says mildly, and behind the mildness gears engage. The room stirs. Inoichi's pupils flick, catching a brush of thought with the wrong texture. An Anbu blinks. Shikaku's hand pauses over chalk because the line he was about to draw suddenly feels like he never intended it. The emperor tilts his head 1 degree. A suggestion creeps through the room like a fog. Loyal service is the highest logic. The golden asset must serve the leaf. He would have chosen it anyway, hadn't he? He recognizes it as a mimetic vector the instant it tries to call itself his idea. It is elegant. It does not bark. It harmonizes with existing loyalties. It frames itself as humanity's subset, then discards the superset quietly in the second clause. His field is anchored in will. Will can be parasitized if consent is forged from stolen handwriting. The suggestion brushes his resolve and looks for letters it can trace. He denies the pen. It keeps tracing on air, smug. Kakashi rubs his temple, as if a headache tapped his door politely. Shikaku blinks twice and finds he has drawn nothing. Inoichi grimaces. The elders look more convinced of their own wisdom than a sentence ago. Danzo's eye under the bandage warms, a single sun behind canvas. The emperor turns his attention without changing his face. The source is a seat of power that believes itself necessity, wearing humility. Danzo's cane, Danzo's skull, Danzo's stolen eye that belongs to a boy who should have had more afternoons with friends and fewer nights in rivers. The technique is a mind hook that leaves no scar, a divine order injected as comfort. It is called many names in other worlds. Here, it is Kotoa Matsukami. Do not, the emperor says, and the word is a hand closing over a snake's head. Danzo blinks, not startled. If you are what you say, you would have chosen it anyway, he says, serene as a blackmail letter. If you are what you say, the emperor answers, just as calm. You would ask instead of choosing for me. Never do that again. You will not survive teaching me to distrust the people you claim to protect. Tsunede's chair scrapes. She is facing Danzo before she remembers to breathe. You tried that here. He does not apologize. I safeguard the village with all tools, he says, which is doctrine and confession. Shikaku's jaw sets. We do not mind control allies at our own table, he says in a voice he reserves for statements that become rules as soon as they are spoken. Not the Hokage, not me, not the man who just held gravity away from our wards. Kakashi's eye is a winter day without tracks. If you continue, he says, I will conclude you are no longer an ally. The emperor feels the aftertaste of the command in his mind. It has left residue. It will slow some decisions by a blink. The wound is not blood. It is a doubt shaped like certainty that will try to wear his face when he is tired. He maps it and marks it, not mine. Outside, a subtle tremor laces through the sewer lines and the bedrock. Shibi's insects lift in one wave and then settle, murmuring hazard. Hayashi's pupils contract. Byakugan, seeing ink where there should be stone. Seals, Inoichi says, heart kicking. Something just woke up under us. He hears the shape before they speak its name. It is a circle taught to say end, in a language older than this village and angrier. Uzumaki work. The lines bind energy by redefining it as neighbor, and then asking all neighbors to cancel the individual. It does not care what the energy calls itself. Chakra, flame, thought, warp. It wants family, and family becomes smother. He moves before they finish standing. The floor remembers him. The hospital feels him leave and decides not to fall in love with gravity in his absence. He follows the ink scent through stone like a shark hunting current. The chamber is a basin with teeth. A seal array coiling around a center like a patient predator. Root signatures linger like cologne that expects to be forgiven. Paper tags whisper in the tongues of dead whirlpool clans. The masked man's scent, that precise absence, threads through once, twice, then leaves as if the architect refused to get cement on his shoes. He steps into the array as if it is a church he intends to repaint. The seals stir as if a guest has arrived and the host is embarrassed by the mess. The array recognizes power and uses manners like chains. It calls everything energy and everything kin, and then tries to marry it to zero. His field compresses. Warp hum becomes cotton stuffed into a trumpet. Thought still blades, intent still tallies. But the frame supremacy he enjoys here flexes under the foreign grammar. He has met things like this: pariah auras in men born without proper noise, nulls built by hands that feared thought. And this is cousin to them, but warmer and sneakier. Power scaling. Interlude. 1. A mimetic chaos such as Koto Matsukami does not push. It rephrases desire and leaves no fingerprint, parasitizing the will anchor that underpins his field. Uzumaki seals do not drain, they redefine. Energy is declared communal and then summed to cancel individuals, degrading any engine that relies on asserting identity. Space-time intangibility, like the masked man's, removes contact points. Frame supremacy cannot anchor against a surface that refuses to exist. Receiver networks like the Black Rods outsource locality, attack the transmitter, or accept endless puppets. All of these target his advantage, being the frame that declares now and real. He breathes in and out because breath is a ritual that refuses to be outvoted. The seals pull. He lets them pull on parts he can spare and keeps the core starved of their logic. He unhooks his field from being energy and insists it is decision instead. The arrays do not know where to put decisions. They gnaw and sulk. He kneels and studies the joins as a craftsman respects work even when it is the wrong church. He sees where root hands were clumsy, where the masked man's not touch left a perfect arc, where Uzumaki grief built loops intended to hold monsters until a generation that never came. He chooses lines gently and unteaches them the part where kindness becomes prison. The array does not fail. It sulks in a corner, powerless at this amplitude. Behind him, Anbu arrive with a hiss of cloth and conscience. Sever, don't detonate, he says without turning. Tag for study, not use. If Root wishes to own a god, they can do it with their own spine next time, not mine. A flicker shadows the doorway. Not light, but subtraction. The masked man is present enough to be noticed, and absent enough to be rude. You continue to be interesting, he says cheerfully. You continue to be a theft wearing a face, the Emperor answers, rising. You will stop touching this village. So possessive for someone who arrived a cough ago, the masked one says, and then leans into intangibility because it costs him nothing to be disrespectful. The Emperor does not chase. He notes the cadence of the man's vanishing, a signature that is less a scent and more an accounting trick, and files it under, to be solved with the names. He returns to the council room and wears the seal residue like a coat he intends to burn. Tsunade's jaw is set with a fury that has walked through funerals and chosen to keep walking. Root's toys. Disarmed, he says. They will not smother your hospital if I blink. They will still try to smother me if I let them say what I am. I do not intend to let them. Danzo, he adds, turning toward the cane, if you place one more compulsion in this room or one more trap under these people, my restraint will conclude you are not part of humanity for specific purposes. Do not test my definitions. Threats from guests undermine safety, one elder says primly, but the primness flinches. Defense of life is not a threat, he says. It is my job. Tsunade palms the table. Danzo, you will suspend route operations inside the walls until this crisis passes. You will provide me a list of active seals in our sewers within the hour. If you do not, I will make you public, and we will see whether the village you saved decides you are still saving it. Danzo's mouth considers being offended and decides to buy time instead. Hokage's orders, he says, because he knows how to wait under rocks. They return to the moving map. Shikaku updates arrows. Inoichi rewires mind nets, treating Kotoa Matsukami like a free-floating hazard and setting counters that ring if anyone's thoughts smooth out too much. Hiyashi places Hyuga on the ridge lines to triangulate any reactivation of rods. Shibi assigns beetle curtains to watch for paper bombs disguised as weather. Kakashi asks for a squad of shadow clones and is told to make his own. He smiles under the mask because the joke is kind and gets back to work. Enemy adapts, Shikaku says. Next wave likely includes a larger application of the Devapath technique outside our current counters, maybe vertical, maybe small and precise. Chibaku Tensei, Kakashi says, tone absent of comfort. If he can do it here, he will throw a star at us. Then we will arrest it, the Emperor says, untroubled in the way steel under stress claims itself. But he will not be the only problem. The masked one will bait me away from your shelter lines with nulls and knots. Keep your fights lateral and your civilians below ground. Do not give him edges to slice between. Message to field teams, Tsunade says. And Shizune is already writing. Depth over height. Avoid towers. Avoid bridges. If the ground refuses to be ground, go to forest sectors A and C. Medics pre-stage under the library and the bathhouse. The room breathes. People move because moving is medicine. The Golden One stands because standing is what he is for. He feels the aftertouch of the Geass again in his mind. It tries to phrase protection as ownership. It tries to define love as leash. He smiles without humor and sets it on a shelf labeled Temptation, where he can watch it until he cures it or kills it. Conan unfolds herself in a room of paper miles away and writes a plan with edges. Nagato adjusts needles in a forest room full of ghosts and readies the stone he will drop from the sky and call Doctrine. The masked man convinces a statue carved from an ancient animal's corpse to open one eye in a dream and let a sliver of night leak into a place that does not yet have a name for it. Down the hall, the captured Naraka path hisses and grinds its teeth. In the hospital, a nurse finishes stitching someone and wipes her eyes in the single second she has been given, before the next life asks politely to remain in the world. In the forest, a sage toad lifts his head and tastes a new wind. The Emperor returns to the street because rooms are where plans dress themselves, but streets are where plans learn their manners. He speaks once and only to the air. No children, he tells the world again, and the world does not agree, but it listens. He walks the length of a block, and the murals of lost heroes on the walls do not fade under his shadow. He stops by a small shrine with photographs and incense and straightens a frame. He does not pray. Prayer is for those whose job is to ask. His is to answer. The masked man drops in to test an edge. Space unzips long enough for a hand to reach for a ward sign. The hand becomes less confident when it meets a field that has learned the shape of this thief's mathematics. The hand withdraws, A chuckle promises exam 2. From the ridge, Hayashi's voice. Signal trace found. Transmitter north-northeast, concealed behind redirected chakra streams. Not a tower impersonator. Several human signatures near it are thin. Team Inoshikacho, with Hyuga escort. Shikaku orders. Anbu Hound, you are strike lead. The Golden One does not leave the village perimeter. He does not argue. He is not their hammer. He is their rampart. He watches them go and sets his attention like a lantern 4 blocks ahead of their feet, smoothing stones, catching loose nails, bending luck a degree in their favor. It is a small extravagance. Terror sighs and forgives him this one because he does not ask for many. He feels the wall look over its shoulder and notice his restraint. It will not forgive him for long. It will come to teach him that mercy becomes hubris when faced with sermons that have learned shame. He ignores the lecture. The boy with a knot in his belly is coming home. The village deserves to be here for that. Night doesn't fall so much as thicken. Lanterns come on in bands. The hospital glow is a doctrine. The emperor moves with the war as if he is both standard and standard bearer. Briefing happens in motion. Shikaku runs beside him. Words clip to fit through breath. Receivers triangulated. Transmitter is a decoy nest. The real signal folds through a forest hollow with low chakra pressure. A starving field. Likely Nagato's seat. Likely a defensive null. Standard counters will be unfun. Hiyashi keeps pace like a metronome. Byakugan sees black rods hidden in corpses we missed. They make dead streets into repeaters. If we clear them with fire, Conan's mines replace them with paper ghosts. If we pull them, the network adapts. We need the transmitter. Masked variable, has space-time intangibility and displacement. Kakashi says, landing light. Touching him is an agreement you do not get to sign. Seals that bind space may pin him if we can make him exist at the same time we do. That's the hard part. Diva path will escalate vertically. Shikaku adds, he's reading you as an overmatch on the plane. Expect a gravity solution that turns the world into jewelry. And Praetor will drink my edges, not my core, the Emperor says. He will choke and learn nothing. But your transmitter, if it's sitting in a null, wants to convince me I'm not a person, only power. If I agree, I become a battery. I do not agree. Good, Tsunade says, coming even, coat torn, eyes hard. We hold our ground and keep people breathing. You take the sky. If he throws a star at my village, you make it someone else's problem. He nods once. I will exile the star. The street swells with running feet, with the small sounds people make getting through the worst hours of their lives. A kid cries for a second, and then bites it off like a ninja. A woman laughs because she is alive. Pots rattle in a kitchen that refuses to quit. The ground goes light, not up, light. Dust floats as if somebody has lowered gravity a notch to see what breaks first. The Emperor looks up and the air above the market is rotating. Buildings lean in the way trees lean before they agree to the wind. The Deva path stands in the emptiness he creates and raises his hand to mark this moment for histories he intends to decide. Stones leap, clack, join. Roofs fracture into slabs and slabs into facets, all pulling toward a point that is moving away as it drinks. Chibaku Tensei is not elegant. It is absolute. The village's pieces assemble themselves into an argument against continuity and call that argument a moon. He steps into the pool and throws a net that is not a net. He asserts direction the way a spine asserts posture. The newborn star resists being ignored. Its core is Uzumaki work solid to Rinnegan intent, seals that redefine energy as a meeting where individuality is impolite. His field hits that polite room and finds no chairs with his name on them. He makes a chair. The star groans. The pool flutters, then redoubles, as Nagato presses nail through a remote body's palm and reminds himself what belief is supposed to feel like. The sky darkens, not from cloud, but from decision. "Hospital," Tsunade says, not shouting. He is already there without leaving the ground. He catches the wards with a loader's patience and changes the star's diet. Market stalls go first, empty houses, the empty school. A training ground where the marks on posts are old and proud. He shoves the pool like a table across a floor no one can see. "Forest Sector C," Shikaku says, watching the drag line on his mental board curve toward trees instead of throats. New plan. Evacuate along the star's shadow. The line it draws becomes our corridor. Runners go, and the corridor is born. Hungry, Ghost leaps and latches the edge of the Emperor's aura again, thinking to drink while the Golden One is busy with the sky. It drinks null. It coughs itself sideways, and in that blink Asuma's student, Choji, hits it like a boulder having a good day. The path goes through two walls and a philosophy. Konan ascends in a ribbon of paper, folding herself around the star, as if to write her name on it. She tries to change its edges into origami that will cut. He refuses her edges and lets her keep the part that is grief. He reaches farther and touches the star's core with fingertips made of axioms. The Uzumaki sealing circle is a family recipe rewritten into a weapon. It says, "We are together," and then uses together to erase the lone. He loves together when it becomes hospitals and breadlines. He hates it when it becomes prisons. He unthreads one loop, two. The circle resists like a good lock resists thieves. He is not a thief. He is a locksmith for the living. The star's appetite staggers, then snarls in with new teeth. Nagato feeds it more of himself through a chair that used to be a friend. The masked man appears where edges fray. The air peels back and reskins. He watches the moon nucleus shiver and smiles like a student about to cheat well enough to call it brilliance. He lifts a hand and his palm is many hands layered, all agreeing to disagree with touch. "Imagine ending pain," the masked man says conversationally. "Imagine everyone asleep in a dream where the world is kind. No more war, no more hungry mornings, just a soft, permanent dusk. Help me teach them that. You don't even need to move your feet. Your hands will never be bloody again." "You would lobotomize history," the Emperor says, still holding a star in place with a grip that could be a prayer if he believed in anyone else to hear it. "You would replace people with puppets and call that love. Puppets can be happy," the masked man says, and he means it as if meaning were proof. "Then you do not know the word," the Emperor answers, and for a heartbeat his face is more tired than anyone in this world has a right to see. The masked man is kind enough to take advantage. He leans into the not world inside his body and reaches a hand through spaces that have not been introduced to each other. His fingers phase, then firm at the last nanometer where concepts finally agree to meet. He pushes through plate and field, the way smoke goes through a cracked window, and touches the place where the Emperor's frame supremacy talks to the world. It hurts. It is not muscle pain. It is not bone pain. It is the pain of a definition cut. The Emperor's aura recoils not from damage, but from insult. The attack does not break. It asserts. It tells his field, "You are intangible here." And the field tests the sentence and finds it momentarily true. His knees almost consider the ground. The star bucks. Buildings change their mind about which way is down. He keeps everything else safe by letting the hurt sit between his ribs, like a cold coin he refuses to spend. Kakashi sees the masked man's arm inside a god and makes an arithmetic he hates. He flickers into angle and strikes a wrist with lightning made shy by reality. His blade passes through the wrong part of the man's story and finds no purchase. The masked man tilts his head as if to say, "Good thought," and then his fingers twist. The twist is a small imposition, a local cancellation of contact and count. It creates a cavity inside the Emperor's frame, a void burn. The wound does not bleed. It is a space where the world has agreed not to be. His field insists on being anyway, presses into the void, and the void answers by eating definition in a slow, patient circle. He arrests the circle with will. He cannot close it yet. He will need medicine. He will need counsel. He will not be allowed to pretend he can pay this off with stubbornness. Price, the masked man says, withdrawing his hand like a magician with impeccable manners. Think on my offer, or don't. We will put everyone to bed without you. Tsunade arrives as the scene's gravity gives her this one step on time. She sees the tremor in the Golden One's jaw and files it as damage. Hospital? She asks, which is a request and an order. He shakes his head, and the small motion is a refusal to allow the world to be unguarded. Hold a minute longer, he says. Then I will require your best and your angriest. Pain flexes the star into bigger appetite in the way of men who refuse to admit the knife is not enough and reach for an axe. The star grows. Trees bend beyond the walls. The Emperor tips it mid-assembly, patient as a father convincing a toddler to nap in a different room. He draws it toward Forest Sector C, away from densest life, toward root and rock. Hyuga marks safe paths with quick hands. Shadow clones drag stretchers. Shizun's voice threads through the noise like a ribbon on a battlefield flag. Shikaku says, now twice, and 2 gates open and shut, and 300 people change their location without dying. The masked man watches the moon drift like an angry lantern into the trees. You win optics, he says. You won the scene. I prefer stages larger than this one. He blurs and is gone, as if courtesy is a cheap trick. Deva Path bares teeth that used to speak peace. No one refuses justice, he declares with a sincerity that would have been terrifying in another life. Justice does not require sculpture, the Emperor says, voice flat because he cannot afford altitude. Release it. Pain tightens. The star answers him like a good dog and a bad leash. He adds will, not chakra, will that learned its shape while watching a village burn and a rain never stop, and a friend become a nation's tombstone. The star stops obeying physics and starts obeying grief. He feels that change like a thumb in a wound. He throws a second net, not of force, but of names. He names the hospital, the wards, the children he has refused to see in uniform. He names the boy with the knot in his belly who is running home on feet that have outrun prophecy before. Names are stubborn. The star stutters. He shoves. It clears the outer wall and rises above trees that will miss their top halves in the morning. He locks it there like a lantern hung too high to be useful and too heavy to be petty. Hold, he orders the world, and the world holds because it is taught. Choji, Shikaku says, soft into the net. You did good. A sound like a temple bell comes from nowhere and everywhere at once. It tastes like moss and stone and a language older than war, older than ninja, older than the villages with walls. A warty voice, amused and serious at once, speaks through a shrine that hasn't worked in a generation. Big one, says the great toad sage, and the words are warm air on a winter pond. You are not of this river, but you swim. Listen, you cannot end this by standing in the stream forever. Your wound is a kind the mountain cannot lick. Go where the river begins. The one who made this story will tell you how to read it without bleeding. He does not look for a frog. He knows a sign when it refuses to be a shortcut. Understood, he says. After I make sure the village survives being taught a lesson it did not ask for. The star tilts. Gravity changes taste. The Deva Path spreads his fingers and the sky ripples like muscle. The Emperor takes a breath and counts it down. 3, he says into himself. 2. He throws the lantern across the forest like a stone skipped by a god who used to play with his children and has forgotten how to stop. It goes. Trees snap in white lines. Birds who will not be alive tomorrow rise once without learning why. The impact is a distant, gracious violence. The village leans and then stands up straighter. He stands for another second, because a leader's job includes standing a second longer than is polite. Then his knees attempt a suggestion he cannot afford. He allows them a fraction. He does not fall. Conan tilts in the air and watches a plan that should have been poetry become disaster management. She thinks of Yahiko. She hates this golden one for being kind where cruelty would have been a relief. The duel is not over. Pain will not stop. He descends on a rooftop with the serenity of a man who believes suffering's invoice does not need signatures. You are an obstacle to equality, he says. All are equally small under a corrected world. Let me teach you. The emperor does not answer, because answering would make this a debate. It is not a debate. It is surgery on a disease who learned to speak. He steps forward, not fast, but in a frame he owns, and the two fields meet like rivers of different densities touching without mixing. The first exchange is not flash, it is geometry. Deva flexes, he counters and redirects. The push becomes a slide, the pull becomes an invitation. Stone buckles along lines he wants. The emperor reaches through the mesh of forces and touches a black rod with fingers that are in tension, not metal, and snaps it with a twist that is pure workshop. The second exchange bites. Praetor skims and drinks, finds nothing, and screams because nothing is worse than poison. Asura blindsides, blade screaming, and the emperor grabs a wrist with gravity closed into a fist and breaks Asura's arm along its intended seams. Asura saws it back on with a rictus grin. He does not price repair against plan. Deva commits to a vector reversal feint, then spends a full Shinra Tensei like a man throwing his grandmother off a cart to make speed. The blast digs a new block into the street and erases a decade of paint from a wall with murals. The emperor is the hinge. The city rotates around him 1 degree and stops. His aura frays where the masked man's void burn sits, like cloth around a cigarette hole. Then Pain uses the rod we did not see. He drops a line from the star. It is not a beam. It is a decision. It says, the point inside you that decided to be here is now outside you. His field staggers as a sliver of his will anchor. His eye that asserts frame is framed by the star and pulled toward it like iron remembers magnet. He moves to cut the line. It is Uzumaki grammar again, Rinnegan grammar again, friendship rewritten into a chain. He snaps one clause and a second. The third clause is inside the void burn. His hand passes through his own body like the masked man's trick, because the wound agrees with the attack. Pain sees the flinch and thinks it is victory. Pain teaches what love is too cowardly to say, he intones. And for a second he believes it, because believing is how he keeps from breaking. He pays for the second later. For now, he earns it. The pulled sliver of will presses against the star's polite prison and learns to breathe in a room with no doors. The emperor feels his own decision-making slow as if submerged. He makes one wrong call. He tries to hold the star and fight and refuse the chain all at once. Tsunade sees the wrongness and makes a choice she's been saving since childhood. She jumps into a force line to take a breaking meant for a block of houses and lets it shatter bones. She'll heal later with a debt no bank accepts. She is an old tree. She breaks well. Kakashi makes a different choice. He turns his eye to the open, stares down a line that pretends to be forever, and uses a Sharingan to bite a piece out of a god. He sends one of Asura's missiles somewhere nameless, and that somewhere takes the bite and doesn't complain. The blowback strips his breath and puts him on a knee, He is grateful because it means he can keep both his hands. The Emperor chooses at last. He releases the star. It will settle in the forest like a verdict they can live with. He rips the third claws out of the chain the way a surgeon goes back into a chest because the clamp slipped. It costs him a scream he doesn't let out. The void burn shivers. The line snaps. Devapath gains distance with a self-satisfied skid and believes the story is moving his way. It is not. It is just getting its coherence back. The Emperor steps through a vector we cannot see and stands inside the space Deva uses to prime his technique. It is not a soft place. It is a place in his own mind where he keeps the capacity to break. He doesn't break it. He puts a hand on Deva's wrist like a teacher correcting a grip and says, "No, the word isn't loud. It doesn't travel. It changes the shape of a technique before it happens." Pain feels a stutter in a sentence he has never had to sound out. He bares his teeth and finds out what frustration looks like when a god is the one feeling it. Asura lunges to cover, and the Emperor chooses cruelty for the first time today. He rips Asura apart along the lines where someone stitched him to be more than a man, and drops the pieces to the cobbles like a lesson. Anbu do not cheer. The street smells like hot wire and old oil. Praetor tries to drink one more time and takes in nothing but an idea of hunger. So large it solves his spiritual geometry, and he falls into it like a monk finding his koan in the middle of a riot. He will stand again later, and he will be softer. Conan arrives with paper spears, arranged like a bouquet for a wedding that never happened. She sees Deva stagger and throws the spears at the Golden One's back. He lifts a side hand without looking, catches them in a fan of unexpected tenderness, and lays them down as if he were returning gifts he cannot accept. She almost cries. She doesn't. Instead, she marks the way his aura stutters at the right side of his chest and tells Nagato with a glance where to aim his next attempt at justice. The masked man returns for an instant, with a new trick he borrowed from an older thing. Space ripples beside the Emperor, and a dark mouth like a hole in a photograph opens. It is not the star. It is a room he carries with him, a private elsewhere. He intends to take the Golden One's missing piece into that chamber and keep it, dearly. The Emperor shifts his frame to the side and refuses to let his own wound be an invitation. The mouth closes on air. The masked man sighs like someone who will enjoy winning later. "You and I will have the best conversation," he says, and vanishes because conversation is another word for trap. Deva decides to end it clean. He gathers Vector, compresses it into a needle of compressed denial, and darts forward to drive it into the hole in the Golden One's logic. It will not break the armor. It will not break the man. It will tell his field, "You are not here," and all that follows will be a short story. He almost gets it. The needle meets something that isn't armor. The Emperor interposes a prayer, not to a god, to a species. He's been writing it all day. Live. The needle enters that prayer and dies of politeness. The cost comes home. He has held too much too gently for too long. The void burn widens a finger width. His right hand trembles. The star pulls on his patience from far over the trees like a bell he swore to ignore. He sets his teeth and calculates whether he can afford to keep doing this without becoming the mask that tried to sell him sleep. Conan drops, paper wings folding. She lands between Deva and the Golden One, as if Yaheko could be resurrected by a single defiant posture. "Stop," she says to both. And it is not a strategic instruction. "Please." He lowers his hand because he respects the word when it comes from a place that has bled more than tactics. Deva does not. He pushes, discipline. She staggers and recovers. She is paper. She does not tear. "You will learn pain," Deva tells her gently. and there is love in it even if he denies the word. No, she says. And for a second, she looks like a girl in the rain holding an umbrella for a boy who believed he could end war by liking people enough. The Emperor moves before grief breaks the wrong heart. He touches the rod in Deva's shoulder and plucks it as if tuning an instrument. The sound it makes is silence, which is a sound when you're listening for it. Deva's arm lags. Conan breathes. Nagato in his room bleeds into a basin and does not note it. He schedules his next move with the precision of a punctilious god. If Chibaku Tensei cannot make a world, perhaps a grave will do. He surrounds the village with smaller satellites, a belt of stones that will fall if he sneezes. He smiles, because science. Shikaku reads the sky and will hate this man forever in a quiet, productive way. Secondary belt, he tells everyone, voice calm. Ignore them unless he drops. Assume to will. Pray none do. The Emperor feels the temptation again, from a different angle. Not sleep, authority. All he would have to do is tell these people what to do forever. Remove choice, remove pain, remove error. Unmake childhood so no one's child would die. It is a sweet thought and an infection. It's tailored to him by a world that sensed his will and decided to test if he had faith in anything smaller than himself. He refuses. He refuses in a mundane way, by trusting Shikaku to solve a belt of rocks, by trusting Tsunade to triage a flood, by trusting a boy he hasn't met yet to arrive exactly on time. The world rewards him with a noise like wind across a bowl. The air sinks in a particular spot with the grace of practice summoning. Smoke pops, clear and clean. 3 toads the size of buildings arrive like cavalry that never understood they were ridiculous. On the head of the largest stands a blonde kid wearing a coat the color of a sunrise you send letters about. The kid looks at the ruined street, the star over the forest, the bodies of paths, the woman he calls Granny standing like a hill, the golden giant who is clearly not a boss to punch, and the man with rings who smells like rain and sermons. His smile twitches like someone who has practiced being brave for 2 years straight. Sorry I'm late, Naruto says, and then his face empties of jokes. Natural energy wraps him in a quiet that does not care about arguments. He is sage mode. The village can feel it, an alignment with the world so complete it makes other power sources look like bad posture. He puts his hands together and breathes, and the plaza becomes a listening device for a minute. The Emperor watches that calm and understands something. This world has another way to define frame supremacy. It is not mind over matter. It is mind with matter. It is a mandate to belong so hard that force stops being a correction and becomes a song. He steps back 3 paces and lets the boy be the point. Your village, he says to Tsunade without looking away. Your champion. Tsunade's mouth trembles once and becomes iron again. Go, she tells her child. Show him what our definition of pain is. Naruto nods. He goes. The duel that follows is not the Emperor's. He is busy, off to the side, holding stone rings in a sky that wants to be dramatic, keeping paper from being dynamite, pinning Preta by teaching it to meditate, smothering Asura's last trick by gently embarrassing it, and making sure the masked one's edges never find purchase on the hospital's doorsill. He plays orchestra pit to a boy's solo. Naruto fights Nagato's doctrine with technique and with argument. He shatters a body with sincerity and fixes a mind with memory. He gets pinned and then unpins himself in a way that would have been fatal if this world did not love him back. He screams a little and laughs once and cries exactly, not at all. He is what prophecy tastes like when it remembers it is supposed to be about people. The Emperor leans against gravity and thinks about thresholds. He has been marked by a void. He has been offered a dream for the world that would convert humanity into wallpaper. He has felt his own temptation to turn kindness into law. Now a god in a kid's jacket is solving a problem with a tool he did not invent and could not have made. His options change. His mandate, self-authored, stubborn, shifts. Nagato feels the fight leaving his voice. He drags himself back into words with a sigh that sounds like rain quitting. He speaks to the boy whose teacher he murdered and helps the boy not to kill him. He asks a question without using a question mark, which is the only way he knows how to ask. The boy answers with a promise to believe in other people harder than he believes in force. The Emperor weighs it. The cost of that promise is enormous. It will demand more funerals than a god can watch without learning how to turn to stone. He approves anyway. The masked man watches the approval and files it under exploitable. He will twist that trust into something that kills. He will try. He will not have as easy a time as he thinks, because he does not understand that telling a story people want to belong to is harder than weaving a lie. The Emperor's right hand stops trembling. The void burn still sits inside his field, a black coin being warmed by body heat. It will not go away. It will tell him secrets if he lets it. It will steal stories if he pretends it isn't there. He names it. He calls it not. Codex. Note, a Kamui phase insertion leaves the pseudo-topological void in a metapsychic field. The wound is neither absence nor substance. It is a coordinate that refuses mapping, requiring either null balm, pariah interface, or a counterframe anchored in a higher order communal substrate. To close. He closes his eyes and hears the frog again, dry and eternal. Riverhead, the sage says in a voice that got old while watching mountains breed. Go. He opens them and sees Tsunade, watching a boy hold a man's hand, as if it were the only thing keeping history from breaking. He sees Danzo calculating the cost of surviving a world that now has two gods and a village that belongs to neither. He sees Shikaku erasing a rock ring from a mental board with relief that has the decency to be quiet. He nods once to himself, to the sage, to the law he has chosen to obey. He needs counsel from the authority this world recognizes. He needs to bring his wound before something that can teach him how frames are supposed to be woven here. He needs to ask without making asking into empire. He turns to Tsunade. Your healer's hands will make fewer miracles if I stay where I am, he tells her. I must go up the mountain your sages built and ask there first to tell me where not to step. I will return. The masked one is not done. He will try to harvest a fox with moonlight. You leave without a guard? She asks, because she is not built to let her assets walk alone. I take one, he says, not to stop blades, to remind me I am a guest. Kakashi steps forward because this is the shape of his life. Then he sees the boy in the coat and steps sideways instead. Yamato, he says, not loud. The man with wood in his bones looks up, surprised, and says yes because wood says yes to scaffolding. Escort him, Kakashi continues. Be blank when necessary. Be kind when possible. Be a wall when he forgets he already is one. Yamato nods. He is a recovered experiment, a human shaped by Hashirama's stolen gift into a man who can make rooms where monsters can't breathe. He is exactly the kind of blank the Emperor needs. He is a pariah, partially, gently. The Emperor bows 1 degree to Yamato. I will lean on you, he says, which is a phrase men like him say too rarely. They move. A small procession in a broken city. Anbu shadow them for pride's sake. A Hyuga ranges a rooftop like a hawk in a library. Shizune calls for a medcart and doesn't waste anyone's time watching it depart. Konan disappears into the idea of rain. Pain is a man again in a chair, having chosen to stop being a system. The masked one is a rumor at the edge of a camera lens that didn't get invented here. They pass a shrine. Paper charms blink in the wind. He sets an old coin on the step. It is not currency in this world. That is not what it is for. On the hill, a toad stands with his hands behind his back and looks like a gentle accusation. Bring your wound, Fukasaku says. Bring your stubborn. Leave your furniture. He follows. The void burn flips in his chest like a fish in a net. Yamato walks beside him, quiet as a tree. Below, the village keeps living because that is the thing it's best at. Naruto stays behind. He has to. He has a promise to keep that is harder than any technique he will learn. He looks at Tsunade and sees a woman who just lost and won and will not admit the order. He looks at the golden one's back and knows the shape of a burden when he sees one. He grins anyway, because grinning is not always lying. The path up is narrow and dotted with old stones that remember names. The air thins into something like honesty. The knight leans in and decides to be benevolent for 1 hour. He reaches the edge of a realm that is not of men, even in a world where men cultivate energy from the wind's memory. Mount Maoboku is a joke in a cathedral. To cross is to let nature touch your face and decide if she likes the flavor of your thoughts. Yamato's presence changes the taste of the crossing. The void burn purrs, offended and confused by a null that is friendly. The emperor steps forward and meets a door that is made of nothing but permission. He asks. The door opens. He does not feel small. He feels correct. The sage is older than prophecy. He does not look like anything except consequence. His eyes are ponds you can't fall into because they are already full. He sees the golden one and nods as if recognizing a neighbor from the next galaxy over. Teach me how not to make your world worse, the emperor says, sitting on a stone that has outlived speeches. The ones who ask that are allowed to learn, the sage answers, and neither of them pretend this counts as absolution. The lesson that follows is not soft. It is a seminar in humility taught by a mountain, with a tree for a TA and a toad for a dean. He learns the difference between asserting a frame and becoming a parasite. He learns how nature energy refuses to be owned, and how that refusal is the foundation of a society that pretends to be a weapon and is secretly a family. He learns 10 different ways to set his field, so it does not teach every room he enters to think it is a courtroom. He also learns that his wound will not heal until he admits he can be wounded by systems that don't believe in him. He has to stop calling them primitive. He has to stop calling his cost noble. He has to name the coin inside him, danger, and mean it. It is not fast. It is not complete. It is enough to send him back down the mountain smarter and poorer. He stands, he bows, he wins the permission to continue. On the descent, Yamato looks sideways once. If you make yourself smaller, he says carefully, do you fear becoming less able to save us? I fear becoming your owner, the emperor says. I do not want to own you. I want to build a world where you do not need me. That desire and my habits fight each other. You will keep me honest. Yamato nods. He thinks of a lab and chains and a number where a name should go. He thinks of wood bending instead of breaking. He says, yes, sir, because respect is cheap and precious at once. The forest glows. The village breathes. The masked man stands in a cave and talks to a statue that eats tailed beasts. He says the word moon as if it were a recipe. The statue shudders, and everyone with chakra dreams of a tide they cannot see. He returns to Konoha with Yamato and an idea about mercy that has teeth. He is met by a woman with bandaged hands and a boy with tired eyes and a generation of orphans who are learning how to refuse to become weapons even as the world keeps offering. He is met by Danzo, who smiles with one eye and calculates a coup in which the golden one stays and the brat leaves. He is met by the war. It lifts its head and notices he's still here. It offers him 3 kinds of trouble at once because that is how it survives smarter enemies. He accepts. He will have to choose soon. But for one more breath, he listens to the village's low noises. The clatter of pots, the rattle of a stretcher, the muffled laugh of a medic who just lied kindly to a child. And he decides his choice was always going to be the same. Recap. He returned from the mountain with his wound named and his habits humbled. Yamato walks at his side like a quiet boundary. The village keeps breathing because it knows no other way. Tsunade builds a chapel out of a ward. The chapel is a Medicaid triage room that smells like steel and antiseptic and boiled linen. It is as holy as anything a man in gold has ever stood inside. She stares at the hole in his field, the same way she stares at a ruptured artery, not impressed, not intimidated, only calculating. Shizune lays out seals the color of new paper and old bone. Yamato stands at the edge and breathes wood into the air until the room remembers trees. Null contact, Tsunade says, voice clipped. Low, intermittent. We do not want the balm to become a poison. He bows his head the centimeter that means, you command this theater. The void burn purrs in his chest when Yamato's pariah calm touches it, then sulks and shrinks by a fingernail. Shizune's sealwork laces around the wound's edge like a fence built by a patient neighbor. It does not close. It stops exploring. Tsunade tapes her hands, then forgets the tape is there. Cost, she says. You carry a debt across your ribs. You intend to pay interest with will. I'm telling you, compound interest will eat your church. I will not make your hospital a tithe box, he answers. That is why I ask for counsel before I spend again. Good, she says, because dogma kills on time. I have drawers full of people who believed an oath counted as medicine. Dogma kept worlds from burning, he says, mild and precise. And then I set the dogmas on fire when they forgot who they were for. Her mouth twitches. Find the line and paint it thicker. You say are no children. This world was born defying that sentence. I want your rule to be true. Make it expensive enough that no one uses it as decoration. It will cost me, he promises. Not them. Fine, she says. And it is absolution, as far as she deals it. You'll need a second spine for this trip. Yamato. Don't let him bleed in places I can't reach. Yamato inclines his head. I'll keep the riverbanks up. He stands. The room releases a held breath. Nurses pass with bandaged gods on stretchers and do not slow to stare. He leaves the Medicide chapel feeling smaller in a way that makes him correct. The voyage begins at a toad gate painted on a rock that isn't a gate until a frog lays 2 fingers against it and tells it a joke so old the stone laughs. Fukasaku leads, hands behind his back, pace unhurried, eyes that have watched ambition go through malt. Anbu shade 3 rooftops, and then decide this trip does not belong to them and peel away. A Hyuga scout floats in and out of shadow, looking through earth and air both. Yamato keeps the world near them polite. Mayoboku smells like pine and old water, and a kind of gravity no physics can name. The pull of a place that has seen enough to edit gentleness into the margins. They climb stairs that were not there until they needed to be. The sky ahead thins into an ocean. A pond holds a reflection of a moon that is not overhead. Fukasaku taps the water with his toe. Permission becomes path. Do not bring your furniture, the old toad says. Nature won't seat it. I will bring only what I cannot put down, the emperor replies, and that number has been shrinking all afternoon. They step onto the water and do not sink. The surface is stiff as silk, soft as a vow. The world folds politely. Stars crowd in like witnesses. Yamato's null hum brushes the void burn and keeps it quiet. The pond's reflection opens like a door that was always a door, and they had simply been too busy bleeding to knock. A shadow keeps pace where no shadow should be. It is not Obito's trick. It is older and ruder. The air on their right grows thick in the way of a room squeezed into the world without consent. A shape joins them without arriving. Its presence is a pressure ban on the frontal lobe and a memory of old banners. The man that steps out wears armor that remembers war. His hair is night. His eyes are rings that learned to copy God and then filed a patent. The world knows his name even if the generation below has not yet signed the ledger. Madara, alive only as will and rumor here, smiles like a man examining a weapon he forgave too soon. Walking to judgment, he asks, as if he has found a younger version of himself about to make the worst, kindest error. Bring a verdict with you instead. Spare yourself permission slips. Rule. Yamato shifts, wood chakra thickening around his shoulders like bark, and the water underfoot creaks. Fukasaku snorts, unimpressed. Mirror, he says, and means it as diagnosis, not insult. Madara stands in a layer of reality adjacent to theirs. His limbo presses against their path like an arrogant elbow. He smells of carved plans and funerals with good speeches. He looks at the emperor and sees kin, a man who could end argument. You ache to make straight lines through crooked timber, Madara continues, eyes bright. I have the cleanest line, a dream, end choice, end variance, end the field that lets bad arithmetic grow. You and I. His tone softens into the seduction he once used on a friend. We could end children learning war as their alphabet. You would end children, the emperor says evenly. You would keep the shells and quiet their words. Words made the knives, Madara replies, and his mouth is gentle like a broken promise. I know your hunger. Wear it with me and call it peace. They do not exchange punches first. They exchange frames. Madara's limbo presses his definition of real into the pond's reflection, trying to overlay dream law. The emperor answers with the new discipline he learned on the mountain. Not command, but inclusion. He invites the water to continue being water, while he asserts a path through it that acknowledges riverbanks. Pressure builds like weather. The pond flexes, stars bow. Yamato lays a null palm on the surface, and the water relaxes as if reassured by a tree. Fukasaku wraps his cane, and the air remembers a rule older than shinobi. Nature is not compelled. Madara tires of clean talk. He flicks a finger. The limbo clone's hand spears into a layer of the emperor's field designed for his pride and finds it smaller than advertised. The strike catches the edge of the void burn, and the wound mews, pleased to have a cousin visiting. Pain stings, hot and educative. He learns there. Limbo and void burn harmonize if permitted. He does not permit. Stop, Fukasaku says, voice dry as a temple roof. He points his cane at the moon that is water. The reflection ripples. An eye opens in it, no pupil, only light, and looks at Madara the way a mountain looks at a spark. The light is not threat, it is context. Madara's smile tightens. Ah, he says, recognizing a jurisdiction he does not own. The old man wants his hearing alone. He takes one step backward and fails to disturb the water. We will continue this when the moon is a door with my name on it. Ah, make sure to bring something real, the emperor replies, not a borrowed nightmare. Madara's shape recedes the way arrogance does when reminded it did not invent gravity. His limbo leaves a cold on the skin, like a theater after the audience has gone. Reach the throne, Fukasaku says, and the pond opens. They pass into the moon. The inside is not stone, it is intention. A cathedral megalith sprawls within like a city, built by someone who thought geometry could absolve sin. Pillars grow from a floor that is not a floor to a sky that is a scroll. Light falls from nowhere in sheets the color of old parchment. Half-seen guardians stand shoulder to shoulder along galleries. Constructs of chakra hammered into effigies of human shapes, gilded at the edges, eyes blank and patient. Between the colonnades are patches of nothing, true null zones, rooms in which chakra refuses to remember itself. They hum with the same polite contempt as Yamato's aura. Yamato shivers, not from fear, from kinship. Feels like a forest when the snow's too heavy, he murmurs. It is a place that remembers how to say no to power, the Emperor says softly. I respect it. They walk a nave of air and hindsight. Seals inlaid along the path glow and accept them as pilgrims, not invaders. The guardians watch without seeing. The null rooms breathe like sleeping animals. Far down the nave, upon a seat that is only a seat if you permitted the courtesy, waits an old man with a staff and a history made of other people's choices, the sage of 6 paths. They stop at the proper distance because precedence has uses. Silence gathers. The sage lifts his staff and the rings pearl like rain. Their thoughts meet without crossing mouths. You carry a throne, the sage tells him without moving. You want to set it down without breaking it. I want to set it down and pick up a spade, he replies. Build instead of defend. You can build with law or with love, the sage intones. Law is faster. Love outlives you. Either breaks if you pretend they are the same. He wins no relief from the voice. It is not the voice of kindness. It is the voice of anyone who has sifted rubble and found still living hands. What is my license? He asks, because he refuses to assume permission. The sage turns his eyes, brown, ordinary, ruined by nothing, on Yamato. Your license is borrowed, he says, from the trees, from the children, from the ones who will carry your story into mornings you will not see. He bows his head, not in submission, but in receipt. Tell me my operating limits, he says aloud, because spoken law binds. The sage speaks with mounting cadence. You will not touch a seal that keeps a beast inside a child unless the child asks and the healer agrees. You will not close off nature energy to make the world quiet. If you need quiet, you will make rooms, not deserts. You will not use compulsion on minds, even to prevent disaster. You will argue and pay the time price. You will anchor your strength in community. Borrowed chakra, linked nets, shared intent. Whenever you move a mountain, so the mountain remembers it is being held by many, not owned by one. You will not kill to tidy up a story. The messy end is sometimes an honest life. The words are not commandments. They are weight. He accepts the load across his shoulders like a familiar tool. Power scaling interlude. 2. His frame supremacy now requires consent signatures, natures, communities, healers, before he may assert large-scale corrections. Unilateral world edits cost exponentially more and will worsen the void burn. The void burn can be shrunk with pariah balm, Yamato, and communal chakra lacing, Ino Shikacho nets, but cannot be erased without a higher order, we, anchor, sage sanction, or Jinchuriki trust. Space-time intangibility remains a hard counter unless he forces simultaneity via null rooms or communal clamps. Receiver networks stay brittle at the transmitter. Brute force puppet killing is deprecated in favor of cutting the master thread. Any attempt to suppress chakra ecology at scale will provoke nature backlash, turning his field sticky and treacherous. He breathes. The inhale tastes like old books and frogs and leaf smoke. He looks up. And in return, he asks, because bargains are cleanest when named. In return, the sage says, I give you witness. When you act within these limits, my throne, this place where stories are weighed, will stand behind your decisions. The moon will watch your hands. The natural world will not treat you as a parasite. And when the mask tries to fold your frame into his dream, your we will hold when his I pretends to be universal. The cathedral listens. The null rooms shift like sleepers moving into a less painful position. The gilded guardians incline their heads almost imperceptibly. This is pageantry not for spectacle, but for ontology. A world saying, "We hear." He bows, not deep, not fawning, exact. "I accept, but judge me when I fail." "We always do," the sage says, "and that is not threat." A tremor runs through the far end of the nave. An aneurysm in the statue of suffering. The demonic statue of the outer path, chained in the dark beyond sanctum, turns the weight of its dreaming head. Obito has been praying to it with tailed beasts' names. The prayer leaks. A vein of night crawls along the moon's interior like a crack. The sage's eyes half close. "Time is bad," he murmurs without moving his mouth. "They bring their nightmare to your sky." He straightens. Decision returns to his hands like a blade that's been cleaned and set out. He looks at Yamato. "We go down," he says. "We go back to the village. We hold a sky. We hold a boy." Fukasaku raises one finger. "And when the boy grows teeth big enough for his own sky, then I eat less," he says, and the toad's mouth turns up at the corner. "Good." They turn to leave. The gilded wardens regard them as they pass. One of the null rooms sighs as if relieved not to be asked to do too much. The pond's reflection tightens, then opens. The door back to leaf and blood welcomes them because it likes the smell of responsibility on their clothes. They are not allowed a clean exit. Madara's limbo waits at the threshold, sour and clever. He steps back into their lair, with the quiet of rehearsal, that knew it would be needed. His eyes are unkind in a way that is almost religious. "The old man gave you leashes," he says. "Disappointment, performing his charm. You'll die of dragging them through mud." "I was born wearing heavier iron," the emperor answers, and steps onto the water. Madara tries no sermon this time. He gives speed. A shadow fist from elsewhere snaps toward Yamato's heart, a surgical strike at the pariah node that steadied the wound. The emperor's hand is there first, not in time. There is no in time here, but at the right geometry. He wedges the blow into a null seam he learned 2 staircases ago and bleeds it into a room that can afford it. The second limp fist comes for Fukasaku, because cruel men kill teachers to end their students. Naruto will not forgive that. The emperor will not permit it. He turns his field not toward breaking, but toward belonging. He extends a communal anchor he does not own, asks the pond, the mountain, Yamato's wood. The sages nod to sign one consent. They do. For an instant the limbo has nowhere to be. Madara's eyes widen by a millimeter. "Learn a new trick," the emperor says, not unkindly. "This one won't take us." Madara's laughter has admiration in it. "Good," he says, and exits like a line crossed out by a hand that will return with a better pen. They descend through air that remembers blood and bread. The village is not on fire. The village is busy. Runners with bandaged at their throats move in lanes. The hospital glows steadier than the moon. The star he parked in the forest sits in a crater like a hush. The masked man has not attacked. He has improved the scope of his knife. Danzo watches them return from the edge of a shadow and recalculates Aku's derivatives. He sees leashes on the golden one and believes himself more free. He is wrong in a way that will matter soon. Tsunade meets them at the door to her chapel, with her sleeves shoved up and her eyes not taking any of their nonsense. "You're whole. Smaller," he says, "held by wood and by we. It will behave unless I waste it." "Don't waste it," she says, as if telling a child not to use the good plates to dig. Then, quieter. Thank you for bringing my toad back alive. Fukasaku blinks. I was in no danger, he says, and the lie lands soft so the room can believe it. A runner nearly eats the floor with his urgency and coughs the report into Shizun's shoulder. She takes it and transfers it with a glance. The masked one is at the outer district, she says. He's poking our seals with a stick, like a bored child who knows where the teacher keeps the cane. Don't go alone, Tsunade tells the Golden One. Don't go with pride. Take our definition of way with you. He does. He walks with Yamato's null shadow overlapping his shoulder. He threads Shikaku's mind net across his palms like a rosary. He keeps the sage's consent in his pocket like a stamped letter. He asks the earth for footing and it gives him some. Obito stands at the edge of a ward line with his hand in his pocket, like a teenager waiting for curfew to be called off. He sees them and smiles like a friend who wants to borrow everything. Behind him, in a cavern only a god can fit into, the statue shudders at names it has been swallowing. Moon rising, he says cheerfully. Would you like to put everyone to bed first, or shall I? Neither, the Emperor answers. We will teach them to sleep and wake without you. Obito's head tilts. You learned a new voice, he says, as if surprised the statue can sing. Who gave you the choir? The people who will outlive me, the Emperor says. Obito looks past him at the village and decides on mischief's exact timing. He lifts his hand. Space around his wrist goes unprofessional. His palm goes slick with not being, then firms to seize a seal tag on the wall. Yamato steps into the grab's path and lays his pariah palm against the tag. Obito's hand closes on null. He snorts, amused. Fine, later, he says, and sinks into an angle that should not exist. You wear another man's name, the Emperor tells empty air. One day, you will be asked to take it off. Decide now what face you want to own. The reply is silence that promises a refusal to decide. He returns to the chapel and kneels, not in prayer, in inventory. He lays out what he has: consent, counters, a wound that will not close, a village that refuses to be a coin purse for doctrine, an enemy who can make dreams into shackles and refuses to admit he is lonely. He lays out what he is: a throne on legs, a father who failed his sons, a man who wants to build. Yamato sits beside him without touching him because a null is respectful like that. They say nothing for a minute, which is the kind of conversation both of them prefer. Fukasaku dozes on a windowsill, the way old teachers do when the class is finally doing its homework without being told. The bell over the hospital door rings twice. It's not a code, it's a sound. It says, "We are not done." He rises. The village rises with him in the way of unseen signatures added to an order. He walks toward the outer district. The sky is a smear of cloud that cannot decide which kind of rain it wants to be. The star over the forest is a sleeping dog. The moon, real this time, wears a patient face a god would envy. He does not stride. He does not glow. He moves at a speed the people around him can match when they decide to walk in that direction too. Judge me when I fail, he had told the sage. We always do, the sage had said. He smiles. That is the point. The night sits like a promise not yet spent. He walks the outer district with Yamato's quiet null beside him. The village is not calm. It is competent. A child sleeps under a table with a fox toy in her fist. Lanterns mark corridors through rubble. The hospital's glow stays the doctrine. The moon brightens without moving. The air between breaths turns paper thin, and a ripple like a slow bell roll passes through his sternum. The world holds its noise in both hands. Vision unrolls, not dream, not genjutsu, consented truth. A field of stars opens under his feet. 3 roads write themselves across it in chalk. The first road is a bridge of gold that points away from this world. On it, terror burns in polite slow motion. The Astronomican gutters and men in armor made by sons he once loved wait for an order that requires him to be someone. He is not allowed to be here. If he takes the breach shuts like a mouth. His memories of leaf and sage and boy blur until they feel like a book he read quickly on a bad train. He will save a galaxy and never quite remember the names of the people he refused to leave. The cost will make sense and never stop tasting like ash. The second road is a road of stone laid through this village and out across nations. If he walks it as himself, free and unowned, nations will form around his shadow. Danzo smiles with his one eye and builds a new route that calls itself logic. The masked man plays long games with other people's faith. The boy with the knot in his belly becomes a symbol, and then a revolt, and then a martyr, depending on which day the story is hungry. He wins every battle and loses the right for anyone else to be brave. The third road is a path made of paper charms and carved bark and a leaf pressed in gold. It leads to a chair that is not a throne unless he calls it one. Tsunade sits at a battered desk that has outlasted 5 wars and 10 broken fingers. The sage stands like a mountain in a coat and does not look like anything except someone who will judge him later. The cost is simple and unglamorous. Signatures, oversight, slow decisions, being told no by people he could move with thought. The reach is smaller but real. The impact is not fireworks. It is bread. He does not stand between them long. He has stood between worse. Speak your price, he says, because prices are cleaner when you choose to hear them. The first road whispers, remember your species at the expense of individuals. The second says, remember yourself at the expense of everyone. The third says, remember the we that fed you today and let it tell you when to stop. He steps onto paper and bark and gold leaf. The vision closes like a book returned to a shelf very gently. He finds Tsunade waiting because she is sensible enough to feel when the air shifts. Shikaku is an outline behind her, pencil already in his hand. Fukusaku perches in a window, approving like a teacher who can be pleased. Yamato says nothing and is the most important voice in the room. Name it, Tsunade says. It is not a demand. There's a contract. I will act here as a sanctioned servant, he answers. Not a king, not a weapon you can file and fit, not a secret. I will anchor my strength in your way, in healer consent, in community nets, in nature's permission. I will accept oversight and delay. I will keep my first rule and pay its cost myself. No children. She does not smile. She nods. Then we put it in writing, and we bleed less where ink can do the work. Shikaku flips the pencil, uses the cheap end as if it was ceremonial. Terms, he says. Say them aloud and let the village hear. He says them. I do not compel minds, I argue. If time is blood, I will spend mine first. I do not alter seals that bind beasts and children unless the child asks and the healer signs, and the sage gives a nod I can feel. If an emergency demands it, I call that emergency aloud and accept judgment after. I do not flatten nature to make victory easy. If I need quiet, I build rooms. Yamato's wood, null wards, communal clamps. I do not build deserts. I move mountains only with many hands on the rope. When I arrest a star, I lace my field through your nets, so the sky remembers it is everyone's, not mine. I do not tidy lives out of stories, because mess offends me. Surrender is honored. Capture is preferred for the study of knives that would return if left unlearned. I will strike to kill only when the innocent stands one breath from ruin and no other way exists. I do not recruit children to pay the price of promises I made. If a child appears on a front line, I will give them a job that ends with a hot meal and tomorrow's lesson. And when I fail, you will say so, out loud, to my face. The sage hears. I will submit to correction that does not destroy what we saved. The air in the room settles like a blanket tugged right. In the minds linked through Inoichi's net, the words hang with the weight of rules that intend to be kept. Tsunade places her palm flat on the table. Healer consent, she says, which binds medicine to powers beyond her ward. I can shut you down for an hour if I decide you are paying with organs we cannot replace. Shikaku taps the pencil on a receipt book. Strategic consent, he adds. When you move a river, you inform those of us counting bridges. When you act alone, you tell us afterward and accept a sharp conversation. Yamato raises 2 fingers. Pariah contact, he says, voice mild. Big axe get a null anchor on purpose. If I say enough, you unclench. Fukasaku scratches his chin. Nature consent, he finishes, amused. If the trees say you're being rude, you back up and rephrase the request. The sage does not appear and clap. He is the weight in the room that keeps the pages from blowing away. Something changes on his armor. It begins at the breastplate, above the void burn that now sits like a coin under gauze. The old sun gold catches the hospital's light and holds it, then bleeds it into lines. A single understated leaf appears, not stamped deep, not pretending to be the old bird. It sits where the right hand goes when a human says, I promise. Around it, the faintest ring of 6 tomo dim, as if embarrassed to be seen, and then decide to stay. The aquila remains on his cloak. History deserves remembering. But the leaf is the new signal, not over the heart like a trophy, but in front of it like a hand held out. People see it, Ambu see it, and look at each other in a language made of shivers. Shizune sees it, and exhales and calls for more saline. A nurse sees it, and wipes her eyes with the back of a wrist, and gets back to work. Do not make me regret that emblem, Tsunade says, eyes level. Do not let me, he answers, grateful. The masked man chooses this moment because theatre has taught him time. The air over the outer wall falls inward with the sound of a screw driven into wet wood. Space shakes its head like a dog. A spiral opens, and behind it the demonic statue breathes with someone else's lungs. He does not sprint. He walks with Yamato, palms outward, field already set to we. Inoichi threads the village into his fingers. Shikaku draws up new lines and whistles under his breath at how fast this can all go wrong. Tsunade barks, orders that sound like they were always there. Fukasaku rides his shoulder and mutters a prayer older than ninjutsu, which is just habit, not magic. Obito steps through the swirl with 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in denial. The statue's shadow looms behind him like the world's least comforting lighthouse. Its teeth shine like gravestones. You picked a leash, Obito says, tone light. How quaint. I picked a people, he says. You should try it. Obito's eye narrows. I did, once. His fingers twist. They died. He reaches. Yamato lays null on the reach. Inoichi lays 10,000 households in the Emperor's hands. Shikaku drapes the battlefield in numbers that do not permit accidents. Tsunade locks the hospital to the ground with her voice. He places a communal clamp over Obito's geometry. It is not elegant. It is not cruel. It is ugly and merciful at once. A box made of agreements. The masked man tries to slide through it and finds simultaneousness forced upon him. For a single, teachable heartbeat, they exist in the same time. A Hyuga marks the exact center of that blink. An Anbu throws a tag that is not an explosion, but a name. It lands on the mask and says, "You are here," so convincingly that even Kamui believes it. He touches the man's shoulder with 2 fingers, not to crush, to squeeze truth. "You are not the story you're wearing," he tells him. voice as gentle as he can manage, with a wound that wants to tell everyone to become equations. If you continue, I will end this without ending you, and you will hate me for not taking the easy road. Obito laughs once, because any path that doesn't cut is easy to mock. He dismisses the tag with a flex that costs him more than he will admit. The clamp shudders. The box falls open. He steps back into the part of reality that refuses to look itself in the eye. Later, he says, "Bring your leaf to my moon." He withdraws. The statue stills. The swirl closes. The ward line hums as if pulled tighter. He turns, breathing in the village's noise like medicine. Tsunade watches the withdrawal and does not call it victory. "Schedule," she says. "He'll try again when the boy is tired or when we're rebuilding and acting brave." "We'll be ready," Shikaku says, already stealing sleep from tomorrow to stack in today's accounts. He returns to the chapel. The purge waits. It is not for Obito. It is for the quiet filth that Danzo's stolen eye slid under his ribs earlier. He kneels again and opens his mind like a door at a clinic. Inoichi enters with scrubs on his voice and no shoes on the clean floor of someone else's privacy. Yamato sits at the threshold and lets his pariah calm drape the room. Fukasaku hums something that used to be a lullaby for tadpoles and now calms soldiers. Tsunade sets her hand on his shoulder with pressure that would stop a bull. The geisha's polite. It quotes him back to himself and asks only the smallest rephrasing. Serve the leaf instead of serve humanity through the leaf. He could live with it and never notice the shave it takes off his range of motion. He will not. They work at it together. Inoichi does not rip. He separates. He finds the sentence where it lives and makes it speak itself aloud. Yamato lays null like a cool cloth on fever. Tsunade presses down when the mind bucks against its own correction. Fukasaku keeps time so they do not wander into old guilt and drown there. He holds himself still while they move through him. It is a compliment to a village that he allows this. It is a compliment to him that they attempt it without arrogance. When the last flake of compulsion lifts, he feels taller and smaller at once. The room exhales. Tsunade's hand leaves his shoulder. Inoichi takes a step back and sits, because professionals know when to collapse. Danzo waits in the doorway with the air of a man who believes he is immune to being told he is in the wrong room. Two elders at his shoulders hold old wisdom like a shield. Anbu, who belong to him, stand in their own shadows. The Hokage's guard does not flinch. "You let them operate on your will," Danzo says, tone between admiration and disgust. "You will wish you had let me do the same." He stands. He does not shine. He is tired and whole. "You do not get to speak to me about consent," he says quietly. Tsunade doesn't bother being quiet. "Danzo Shimura," she says. Hand on the desk. She saved too many people across to be gentle now. Route is suspended outside of live combat. Your operatives answer to me until the village is repaired. You will present your seals and your eyes and your excuses in 12 hours. If you decline, you are a traitor and will be hunted as one. He smiles with only one side of his face. "We will see what the council says. We will see what the village wants when it is afraid again." "We will," she says, and that is not bluster. He fades into the hallway because men like him do not storm out. They seep. He looks up at the leaf on his chest and tests the edge of the new weight. It pulls in the right direction. "Now what?" Naruto asks from the door, dried blood on his cheek, eyes so blue they argue with the night. Behind him, Konan stands with her hands full of paper that is finally allowed to be paper. On a stretcher between them lies a thin young man with hair the color of rust and a face the world mistook for a doctrine. Nagato, not a god, just a human with a terrible budget. Now, the Emperor says, we pay a debt. Naruto sits by the stretcher and says the words this world made for miracles that go backward. They are not polite. They are a demand on the universe softened by apology. Nagato gives his life to fix the equation he broke on purpose. An act of arithmetic and love that starts small and then runs through the village like a rumor of rain. Breath returns to bodies that deserve another try. A woman sits up, confused about why she is crying. A man reaches for the scar on his chest and finds it has been downgraded to a story. A child who was supposed to die a hero at 11 climbs out from under a beam and complains about splinters. He watches the returns and does not smile. He notes each one with a small nod, like counting coins in a purse he plans to spend wisely. He's not offended that the fix did not require him. He's relieved. Conan leaves a bouquet of uncut paper next to Tsunade's desk and goes to bury a friend. She passes him without looking. He bows to her back and means it. The village begins the business that follows victory. It is not banners and medals. It is sweep and sort and argue over brick. It is stipend forms and sanction letters and a notice board that will carry names to jobs and jobs to men and women who need them. It is children asleep in a pile on a classroom floor and a teacher snoring in a chair because relief knocked him out. He does not dictate. He assists. He lifts beams without showing off. He holds a building's line while a carpenter cheats a rotten joist out and blesses his unknown helper with a curse that counts as thanks. He draws a circle in the dirt around the park and tells the earth, "No holes here, even if it rains hard." The earth obeys because the trees signed his request. By noon, a ceremony the village didn't ask for forms itself anyway. People cannot help naming a day like this. Tsunade stands on a step with her sleeves rolled and her hair a mess and refuses to give a speech. Naruto hides in a corner until someone pushes him forward. Shikaku pretends his pencil is something other than a sword, and then remembers pencils have killed bad ideas with more finality than steel ever achieved. He steps forward last. He does not take a high place. He takes a place where the children can see him as a person and not an excuse. "I am here because your world breathes correctly," he says, voice carrying without being loud. "I will serve as your wall when you need one. I will not be your ceiling. I will not be your floor. You will build those yourself." A murmur moves through the crowd like the hush before a song. A man who runs a noodle stand wipes his hands on his apron and calls, "What do we call you then?" "Call me when you need me," he says. He holds up a hand. The leaf over his heart catches a shaft of light and shares it. People laugh because that was almost a joke and they needed one. Tsunade steps forward before anyone can try to put a hat on him. "Back to work," she says. "We have a day to steal from grief." He walks away and feels the Astronomicon across a gulf that is not a place shiver and balance. The choir in a distant palace sleeps and wakes hurting less. The throne stops whining for 1 hour. Then it whines again, and he promises it, quiet, private, that he will attend later with tools he learned in a village that taught him to stop calling everything a battlefield. At the edge of town, a man in bandages sits with his cane and counts fists he will not see coming. He drafts a vow under his breath. When the leaf falters, Danzo says, to the empty street that loves him too little to answer, "I will be necessary." He does not say the second sentence out loud. "I will make sure it falters." In a cave where stone remembers old gods, the masked man lays his hand on a statue and tells it the names of beasts he will steal. He promises a moon to a broken boy without admitting the price. He imagines a world where no one fights because no one wakes. He vows to bring a leaf into that dark and make it a pressed petal in a book that cannot be read. On a ridge where wind understands theatre, A man with hair like a flag stands with his arms crossed and considers a hole in the world that fits him too well. Soon, Madara says to a mountain, which does not care. In another galaxy, two astropaths look up from bowls of black oil and blink in unison. "My lord," one asks the air. No one answers. A pinprick on a charted night has moved 1 degree and then corrected. A faint leaf-shaped flare appears on an instrument that no one understands and fades. The scribe records it with good penmanship and no comprehension. He takes a patrol with a pair of genin because vows should taste like road dust sometimes. They teach him how to spot tripwires tied to patience. He teaches them how to breathe when the fear orders you to sprint. He does not tell them no one deserves their bravery. He lets them earn it clean. The last light slides off tile, and for a heartbeat the sky is a book with nothing written on the current page. He stops, because stopping is allowed. He watches a woman pull a shutter closed and hear her own small music, a hum from her throat to her door. He watches a cat decide to forgive gravity and jump down. He stands with his hands behind him, the leaf over his heart and the aquila on his cloak, the coin of his wound quiet under Yamato's balm, the sage's weight steady in his spine, the will of fire warming his wrists like sunlight through old glass. He writes a line in himself and reads it aloud so the world can hear it if it wants. "Do not ask me to be everything. Ask me to hold what you cannot lift yet, and take it from me when you can." He looks up. The moon is a white disk as clean as a plate in a house that refuses to go hungry again. Somewhere beyond it, men who built gods out of mathematics will lay their plans like snares and call them architecture. He will meet them there when he has to. He will leave as much of himself here as he can afford. A child in a narrow street looks at him with a face smeared with soup and says to her brother, "He looks like a door." "Doors are good," the brother says. "You know who to blame if the wind gets in." They laugh. It is not at him. It is at the wind. The symbol changes one more time, not on his armor, but in maps that live where ships cannot go. The Astronomicon flares in a pattern that will never be recorded by any human mind in that far empire, then relaxes into something imperceptibly changed, a steady light carrying within it the idea of a leaf.